Welcome to Dietrich Knowledge Capsule. Today we're diving into something pretty huge. It's this clash between the push for a circular economy and, well, the absolute need for patient safety in medicine. We're talking about pharmaceutical packaging specifically and how the EU's new rules are causing, honestly, a seismic shift. It's not just about less waste.
No, not at all.
It's really about fundamentally changing how vital medicines get to people, trying to protect both patients and the planet.
Exactly. And our mission here is to really deep dive into the source material we have. It's analysis covering the implications of the EU packaging and packaging waste regulation, the PPWR.
PPWR, yeah.
Specifically for the pharma industry. Because look, for a long time, pharma packaging rules were kind of a patchwork across different EU countries. This new regulation, it just gets rid of that fragmentation.
And we need to be clear, this isn't just like a suggestion or a best practice.
Oh, no, definitely not. This is law. It's officially Regulation EU 2024-1781. And it replaces that old directive, 9462 EC, which, has been around for decades. It actually entered into force February 11th, 2025.
Already happened then.
Yes. But the date everyone's really focused on is August 12th, 2026. That's when it applies uniformly across every single EU member state.
Uniformly. That move from a directive, which, countries could interpret slightly differently,
Right.
to a regulation that's binding everywhere, that
Yeah.
feels strategically massive, but doesn't really stop countries from, say, adding their own little extra rules, the gold plating. We see that sometimes.
That's a really sharp point, and something professionals definitely need to ask. So the PPWR is designed for uniformity, especially on things like what materials you can use, how packaging must be designed, the labeling.
The technical stuff.
Exactly, the technical specifications. Those should be harmonized by 2026. But things like the financial enforcement, the extended producer responsibility schemes, those are still managed nationally. So the core design rules, harmonized, gives companies much needed clarity. But the cost of getting it wrong might still vary a bit country by country.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the specific pharma exceptions, which I know are crucial, what are the big picture goals here? Why this massive regulation now? The numbers seem pretty stark.
They are stark, and the goals are, well, ambitious doesn't quite cover it. They want to prevent and reduce packaging waste overall. They want every piece of packaging to be recyclable by 2030.
100% recyclable.
100%. Plus, boost the use of recycled materials in new packaging and, as we said, finally get those harmonized rules across the EU. These aren't just suggestions, they're hard targets.
And the data backs up the urgency, right? Voluntary efforts just weren't cutting it.
Not even close. The source material clearly shows packaging waste in the EU shot up by over 20% in the last decade.
Wow.
And without this regulation, projections showed another 19% jump by 2030. For plastic packaging waste specifically, it was projected to rise by a huge 46%.
46%. Okay, that explains the regulatory muscle being flexed here.
Absolutely. It explains why the PPWR gets right into dictating design. And central to that is this new three-phase system for classifying recyclability. It's not just a simple yes-no anymore.
Right, it's a staged approach. Phase 1 seems like the first big hurdle affecting designs right now for future launches. What's needed by 2030?
So phase 1 is all about design for recycling, deadline, January 1, 2030. By then, all packaging placed on the market has to hit one of three recyclability grades. Grade A is 95% recyclable material.
Right.
Grade B is 80%, and grade C is 70%. And crucially, if your packaging doesn't even meet that lowest grade C, the 70% threshold, it's banned off the market.
So by 2030, the packaging needs to theoretically be recyclable based on its materials, but phase 2, that sounds like where the real-world test comes in.
Exactly. Phase 2 kicks in January 1, 2035. It's called recycled at scale. This is the big one strategically. It means your packaging doesn't just have to be designed for recycling. It has to be proven that it is actually being recycled at scale within the real existing EU waste management infrastructure.
Okay, hold on. So let's say a company develops this amazing new plastic, perfectly recyclable in a lab. But if there aren't enough facilities across the EU that can actually collect it, sort it, and process it economically, it fails phase 2.
That's precisely it. It fails, even with a perfect design. This puts the pressure, the onus back on producers to potentially work with or invest in the actual recycling infrastructure. The sources really flag this views as a major strategic risk.
Because it's not just about your product anymore, it's about the whole system.
The whole system. And then just 3 years after that, it gets even tougher.
Phase 3.
Yep, phase 3 in 2038. From January 1 that year, only packaging that meets grade B, that's 80% recyclable content, or the higher grade A will be allowed. Grade C is gone. It really pushes everyone towards maximum efficiency.
That timeline is quite demanding for everyday packaging. But pharma packaging is different, isn't it? Patient safety is paramount. So here's where it gets really interesting for the pharma industry. How does PPWR handle that?
Right. This is the absolute core issue for medicines, and the regulators clearly prioritize safety. They've built in some really crucial, explicit carve-outs. The key term here is contact-sensitive packaging.
Contact-sensitive,
Meaning anything that directly touches the medicine. So your inner blister packs, vials, the stoppers, pre-filled syringes, anything primary that maintains sterility and protects the drug itself.
Okay, so what's different for those materials? Are they just exempt?
Not exactly exempt forever, but significantly delayed. First, the timing. That tough 2030 recyclability target we just talked about, it doesn't apply to medicinal product packaging until after a big review plan for 2035.
So an extra 5 years for the industry.
An extra 5 years, basically, to validate new materials against all the strict stability and safety requirements. And second, this is critical, the rules about using minimum amounts of recycled plastic. They do not apply at all to that contact-sensitive packaging.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it acknowledges that you just can't guarantee the absolute purity needed if you're using post-consumer recycled plastic, which might have trace contaminants right next to the medicine. Patient safety comes first.
So companies aren't immediately forced to figure out how to put, say, 30% recycled plastic into a sterile vial closure or a blister film. They can stick with virgin materials for now where it counts most.
Correct. The drug's integrity is protected. But, and it's a big but, that delay to 2035 isn't a free pass forever. It's really a signal.
Signal too.
To innovate. The industry has to use this window, this next decade basically, to develop and validate safe, effective monomaterial alternatives, maybe new barrier technologies that can be recycled easily and cost-effectively. They need to prepare for when those recycled content targets might eventually apply after that 2035 review.
All right, so the pressure's still on, just on a slightly longer fuse for the primary packaging. But what about everything else? The outer boxes, the shipping cartons, the big crates, they don't touch the medicine.
No, they don't. And that's the key distinction. Those secondary and tertiary layers, they're generally treated like any other packaging under PPWR. They face the immediate deadlines.
So the cardboard box needs to be recyclable by 2030.
Generally, yes, meeting those A, B, or C grades. But perhaps the most operationally tricky bit for these layers is the minimization mandate, specifically something called the emptiness rule.
The emptiness rule.
Yeah.
Sounds intriguing. What does that limit?
It limits wasted space. By 2030, it puts a cap on empty space, the void ratio, inside packaging. For grouped items, transport boxes, e-commerce shipments, the maximum allowed empty space is 50%.
50%.
50%. It's a direct attack on inefficient shipping. You know, those massive boxes filled with air pillows shipping one small thing?
Yeah, we've all seen them.
Those become non-compliant. You have to right-size your shipments.
Wow, 50% feels tight. Especially thinking about protecting fragile goods during shipping and how different logistics partners handle things. How do companies even prove they're meeting that?
Well, compliance is tied into national monitoring and, importantly, the economic side of PPWR. Companies need to document their void ratios, likely through their quality systems. If you don't comply, you could face fines, and crucially, you'll pay higher fees under those extended producer responsibility schemes we mentioned. It hits the wallet.
Okay, makes sense. Let's talk reusability too. That seems geared towards the bigger logistics, items, pallets, crates, internal transfer containers.
Definitely. Transport and logistics packaging face some pretty aggressive reusability targets. By 2030, 40% of the packaging used for shipping goods between companies or B2B or to customers needs to be designed for reuse and put on the market as reusable.
40% reusable.
And if you're talking about moving goods within your own company network, say, between your manufacturing site and your distribution center, that jumps to 100% reusable packaging required by 2030.
100%. So does that mean things like single-use plastic trays for moving components internally, or maybe specialized disposable containers for clinical trial logistics? Are those just gone?
Strategically, yes, the intent is clear. Pharma companies need to be thinking about investing in durable, standard, trackable logistics assets, things that can be used hundreds of times, returned, cleaned, reused. It means significant capital investment, potentially, and rethinking internal processes to handle that reverse flow of empties.
Okay, a big operational shift there. And just looping back to the plastic rules for clarity, the intercontact plastic is exempt from recycled content mandates for now.
Correct.
But any other plastic parts, like the shrink wrap around a pallet or maybe a tamper seal on the outside of a box, they do have to meet the recycled content goals.
That's absolutely right. Any plastic that isn't directly touching the medicine stretch film, secondary seals, transport strapping, whatever it has to follow the standard minimum recycled content targets set for plastics generally under PPWR, the safety exemption is very narrowly defined.
Got it. So beyond the materials themselves, PPWR brings in wider system changes, right? Starting with transparency and labeling. What's coming down the pike by 2028?
Yeah, by 2028, get ready for mandatory EU-wide standardized recycling labels. Every single pack sold will need a clear, visible label showing exactly what it's made of and, crucially, how to dispose of it correctly, which bin it goes in, essentially.
Standardized labels everywhere.
Everywhere. And the analysis suggests many companies will likely use digital tools, like QR codes perhaps, linked to more detailed sorting info and maybe even proof of their participation in recycling schemes.
And that links into the money side, the EPR.
Directly. That transparency feeds into extended producer responsibility, EPR. This is non-negotiable, applies to all pharma packaging, no exceptions here. Companies have to pay for the collection, sorting, and recycling of the packaging waste they put onto the EU market.
The polluter pays principle, basically. Shifts the cost onto the manufacturer.
Exactly. It forces companies to internalize the end-of-life cost of their packaging choices. But the really clever, or maybe painful part, is how those fees are calculated.
The eco-modulated fees.
Precisely. This is the financial hammer, you could say. The fees are eco-modulated, meaning if your packaging is easy to recycle, lightweight, made of a single material, hits that grade A recyclability, your fees will be lower. Significantly lower.
And if it's complex?
If you use heavy, complex, multi-layer materials like some of those high-barrier blisters or stuff that's hard to sort, your fees will be much, much higher, punitive even. It makes bad design financially painful and good design financially rewarding.
Okay, so faced with all these deadlines, 2026 for the law applying, 2028 for labels, 2030 for recyclability and the emptiness rule. What should companies be doing right now? What are the immediate practical steps?
Well, the source analysis points to 4 key strategic actions that are pretty much non-negotiable to manage the risks and the costs.
First step has to be figuring out what you've actually got, right?
Yeah.
An audit.
Absolutely. Step 1, conduct a comprehensive material audit. Map everything. Every blister foil, every vial, every carton, every pallet wrap. Map it against the PPWR criteria. Identify your problem children, the complex multi-layers, maybe PBDC, that are going to struggle to meet even grade C. And spot the easy wins too, where a simple switch, maybe to a standard mono-material carton, gets you to grade A quickly.
Okay, audit first. Then what? Addressing the materials themselves. That sounds like the tough part, especially for the primary packs.
It is tough. Step 2. Aggressively pursue design for recycling. This means really pushing towards single material packaging monomaterials wherever product stability allows. Trying to switch blisters to PE or maybe specific polyolefins. Critically, looking at things like adhesives and inks too, making sure they don't contaminate the recycling stream. These are now strategic R&D priorities.
But like you said, moving away from those super protective layers, the PVDC or coil layer and blisters, that's a huge risk for shelf life, especially for sensitive drugs. How do companies balance that need for protection with the push for recyclable monomaterials?
That is the core technical tightrope walk. Companies need to use that delayed 2035 deadline for contact materials wisely. That means starting parallel testing programs now. Validating these newer monomaterials under accelerated and real-time stability conditions immediately. Essentially, the PTWR is forcing the R&D timeline for sustainable packaging to be just as rigorous as the drug development timeline itself.
Right. What about the waste minimization, that 50% void rule?
Step 3, right size and minimize. This is about optimizing packaging geometry to hit that 50% empty space cap. It's not just about using less bubble wrap. It might mean designing thinner walls for boxes, creating better internal holders, or even where it's safe and clinically okay, reducing the size of bottles or vials slightly. This step actually offers immediate wins, less material use, lower shipping costs.
Good point. And the final step connects back to those fees.
Exactly. Step 4. Full engagement with EPR and fee optimization. Companies need to get registered with all the national EPR schemes across the EU now. They need robust systems to track their packaging data weights, materials, and then use that eco-modulation strategically. Design packaging that qualifies for lower fees, aiming for grade A or B. Turn what looks like a cost center into a potential competitive advantage through smart design.
So wrapping this up, it's clear this PPWR isn't just another regulation to check off a list. It feels like a fundamental catalyst for innovation in pharma. The pressure is immense, hit sustainability goals without any compromise on product quality or patient safety. It's a huge challenge.
It is.
But it seems like the companies that really lean into this design for recycling approach now are the ones who will effectively own the compliant, efficient packaging supply chains going forward.
I think that's right. And it leaves us with a really interesting, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. We talked about how regulators specifically push back the hard targets for context-sensitive packaging until that 2035 review. So the question is, what kind of truly unprecedented innovations, whether it's in high-barrier monomaterials that are safe and recyclable, or maybe completely new ways to decontaminate recycled materials so they can safely touch medicine, what needs to happen technologically in the next 10 years to make reaching that grade B, that 80% recyclability, actually feasible and safe for primary drug packaging? That's the multi-billion-dollar question facing the industry this decade.